welcome to sourdough making. You guys, I gave you a starter. This is your starter that I gave you, and it should have about 120 to 130 grams in it. What's next? How do we get this to become sourdough? So I'm going to go through the process of turning this into your full starter, and then eventually I'll do another video where we take our starter and measure it out and turn it into a recipe. But right now we're just going to feed this starter to get it to grow. So what we do is we have a electric food scale. Always measure all of your ingredients. The only thing I don't measure is the yeast, because it's just a teaspoon and then pop it in our recipe. Some recipes you don't have to use yeast. I do the really easy one because I'm a lazy sourdough maker and I don't want to have to do all that extra stuff. So what we start off with is a weck jar. I don't know if you can see the label. I'm going to be backwards. But this is a nice clean jar. So on your scale, you turn it on and it'll say grams. Measure always in grams. Then we put this on the scale. It'll tell you a number, and if you hit the button, it'll clear it out, so now it is at 0. And from that, you're going to take, I'm going to use this because this is mine. You have your sourdough, and we are going to use a spoon. I'm going to stir it up a little bit. I don't know if you can see that. This is straight from the fridge. Okay? Nice and loose, it's not super stiff. It's going to have like bubbles in it, like a webbing, and that's unfed. So that's all good stuff. And just stir it down a little bit. And then I'm going to pour it into the jar. Try to keep it towards the middle of the jar. And you want to measure to 120 per the directions. I actually like to use 130 because I feel like I have enough left over, but that is really up to you. Basically, you're working with a ratio of 1 to 1 to 1, meaning if I have 120 grams of starter, I'm going to add 1, that's 1 equaling 120, then I'm going to have 1 equaling 120 of water and 1 equaling 120 grams of flour. So all of it is a ratio of 1 to 1 to 1. So it's the same measurements for each one. So now this says, for me 130, if you want to use 120 per the directions, that's fine. So then I'm going to clear it out again. It'll say the full big number, what it is all the way. Then you click it again, and it's down to 0 again. So now from here, I'm going to add 100, and for you 120. For me, I have to have bigger because I do a lot of loaves. So I'm going to do 130 grams of water. And this you can also play around with. If you're like, well, 130 is too stiff of a sourdough starter, you can do 135. So get there. Of course, too much. So you always want to have like this. If it ends up being too much, you got to pour it back into the jar and start again. You got to go really slow with this thing because it kind of catches up. We're very, very close. And yes, you do want to be that accurate. Okay, so now we're at 135. So what I do is I take this and I stir it a little bit, get it kind of incorporated, breaks it up a little bit. Okay, so right now it says 130, right? So then I clear it. It's going to have the big number on the scale, which is now everything all included. I click it one more time and it's at 0. And now we add our flour, which I always do the little whisk and sift it. And now I'm going to add 130 grams of flour to that jar. Almost done. You got to go slow because it all of a sudden jumps at you. So close. There we go. Okay, so now this is done. Then we're going to give it a really big stir. I'm going to go grab a big spoon because this is not a good one. So this you want to stir up really, really well. My teacups are rattling. Like really good. So everything is incorporated. There's no dry lumps in the bottom of the jar. You need to scrape the sides of the jar so there isn't a bunch of stuff up at the top. As best as you possibly can. This stuff is honestly very sticky. And it's gonna seem really thick right now. But it's gonna work out just fine. So basically what you've done is you have now fed your starter. And this is going to double in size. And, okay, let's put it there. Always nice to keep a wet rag with you. So this is what it looks like. Okay, it's nice and thick. Okay, and then we're going to, jar tilted. Now, from here, you put the little elastic band or rubber band or whatever you got to put there. It's got to go right where the edge is. So you know when it doubles. This is actually, this at the label says Fred, but it's actually normal. Pop the lid on. And then what I do is I have this cabinet. I heat up, this has got rice inside of it, and I heat them up in the microwave. And I put them around the jars, not touching. And then I will wait for this to rise up and double. Okay, so it'll come up to about here. When it's like that, then I'm gonna take a spoonful of it and I'm gonna put it in a glass of water. If it floats, it's ready to use and make bread. If it sinks, it's not quite ready and you'll have to let it rise a little bit more. So we'll take that and put it in here. And it'll sit and rise. And I set it next to it. I put a couple in there because my house is pretty cool. You need it to be at least 70, 75 degrees in that cabinet for it to rise in a decent amount of time. So this is what you do with this. This you don't use anymore. Save it. Save it for your sourdough starter. If you want to give it to friends, you can do the same thing. So what happens is when that doubles, okay, you're going to end up with something that, I don't think I have one that's a little bigger. It'll double up and you'll use it for your recipe. That will be the next video I have. So everybody's like, well, where do you get the extra from? The extra comes from, so right now we're going to use the recipe. We're going to have this much sourdough. It'll double up. You'll have more than plenty. You use what you need from this, put it into your recipe, and then you take 120 or 130 grams and make a new one. You refeed it. When it doubles, then you put it back into the fridge. So now I've got all this starter in this jar. I have way too much. So I'm gonna stir this up. I have an empty jar that will, because I have 4 jars in my fridge. I put them all in there. Then I clean the jar out. Every single time you feed it, you must clean the jar because then you'll end up with mold. We don't want mold. Mold is bad. Clean the whole thing. Then I have my jar, start from the beginning, and I put this on here and I measure it in. So the extra that's been sitting in your fridge, that's called the discard. I like to call it unfed extra sourdough starter. That's what you use to make crackers and pancakes and muffins and whatever you want. Homemade Pop-Tarts. Like, there are so many recipes because it's unfed or discard is what they call it. It's a terrible name for something that people can just throw it away if you don't want to have extra. I like extra because I want to be able to use it and it's good for you. So that's what we have. So follow the directions on here, and then I'm going to do another video of me making the bread with my sourdough starter, and I'll show you why I have so much extra to give to people and to use for recipes.